Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I never feared being alone until the nights grew too long. My name is Elena Foster, 32, a night shift nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Lowell, Massachusetts. After 12 years of working through fluorescent midnights, listening to the steady hum of machines and the sharp wails of alarms, I thought I could handle silence. I thought solitude would be a balm. Instead, it began to peel away the edges of my mind. The apartment on Parker Street was supposed to feel like relief. Second floor, 1 bedroom, rented cheap because the last tenant had died suddenly, though the landlord swore it wasn't on the property. The walls were thin but freshly painted. The kitchen smelled faintly of bleach, the kind of sharp sting that made me think of sterilized trays in the operating room. After years of double shifts charting until my vision blurred, I told myself this place was mine, a room where I could finally be still. But stillness is not peace. It is weight, and sometimes that weight knows your name. The first night I realized something was wrong, November rain was pounding on the fire escapes outside. I had left the hospital only an hour earlier, the copper smell of blood still clinging to my scrubs no matter how often I washed them. I dropped onto the couch, TV unplugged, lights off except for the glow from the street lamps outside. Just as my eyes closed, I heard it, a whispering static that shouldn't have existed. It wasn't the soft, fuzzy crackle of a radio. It was jagged, clinical, like the grinding stutter of a malfunctioning code blue monitor, the kind of sound that sears itself into your nerves. A sound that means someone's heart has stopped beating. For a moment I thought I had fallen asleep at work, that I'd woken up in the ICU again. But the television was dark, the machines were miles away, and the static was here, inside my apartment walls. I sat frozen, every muscle locked, listening. The hiss sputtered, rose, then cut out so fast the silence was worse than the sound. The silence pressed against me like a hand over my mouth. I told myself it was exhaustion. Nurses always hear echoes. The phantom alarms, the distant cries of patients already gone. Fatigue makes the mind invent its own company. And then came the knocks. 3 taps against the shared wall, not the brisk, irritated rhythm of a neighbor telling me to keep it down, not the scatter of pipes cooling. These knocks were hollow, patient, evenly spaced, as if someone waited between each one to see if I'd answer back. I pressed my hand to the wall. The plaster was warm, wrongly warm, as if someone's body heat seeped through. The knocks stopped. I pulled my hand away, and in the pause before my pulse settled, I could have sworn I heard breathing. At the hospital, I mentioned it to Ryan, another nurse who'd worked beside me for years. We were slumped at the break room table at 4 a.m., sipping burned coffee that tasted of metal. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his eyes had that glassy glaze only 10 consecutive shifts could carve. "You live on Parker?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, 2nd floor." He let out a sharp laugh, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Place has a history. Guy hanged himself in one of those units. Some people say he's still pacing around. Maybe that's who you're hearing." I rolled my eyes, but the words hooked in deeper than I admitted. "That's not funny. Didn't mean it to be. Just, place always gave me the creeps. Wouldn't live there myself." He went back to sipping coffee, conversation over, but I carried it with me like a bruise. That night, the mildew smell was stronger when I opened my door. Not just damp earth, something sharper, like the metallic tang of old blood mingled with a chemical sting that reminded me of formaldehyde. The air tasted wrong, bitter on my tongue. My skin prickled as though the smell itself had weight. The knocks returned, louder. Then a dragging sound across the floor of the apartment next door, except the unit beside mine had been empty for months. I checked the hallway. No light under the neighbor's door. No sound from above or below. At 3:17 a.m., my phone lit up. No call, no message, just the sudden flare of the screen, cold blue on my nightstand. I stared at it until the glow dimmed. And in that moment, the wall behind me shivered with a faint thud, like something bumping it from the other side. The next day, I cornered Mrs. Keene, my landlord, in the lobby. She was in her 70s, hunched, her knit cardigan hanging loose on her shoulders. When I explained about the noises and the smell, she grew pale and gripped her keys so tight they jingled. She led me back upstairs, but when we reached my door, she didn't cross the threshold. She just pointed one bony finger at the stretch of wall where I'd heard the knocks. Her hand trembled. "This old house breathes, dear," she whispered, eyes never leaving the plaster. "Don't lean too hard on the walls. It'll think you're knocking back." Her words slid into me like a needle. Not nonsense, not dismissal, fear. Her eyes were wide and wet, and she clutched her cardigan closed as though warding off a draft only she could feel. Then she turned and hurried down the stairs, leaving me standing in the open doorway, staring at the blank wall she had feared to touch. That night, I sat awake on the couch, waiting. At 3:17 a.m., the temperature dropped like a switch had been thrown. 1 second, the radiator was humming. The next, my breath plumed in the air, white in the dark. My skin goose-pimpled, teeth chattering, though outside the forecast said 50 degrees. And then came the sound. A whisper through the vent, sharp and steady, exactly like the hiss of a ventilation tube releasing pressure, the kind of sound that means life or death in an ICU. Only this hiss carried words. Elena. My name. Stretched long, the syllables scraped raw. I clamped my hands over my ears, pressed my back against the opposite wall, but the sound pushed through my palms. It was inside the air itself, rattling through my bones. When my phone lit up again, I grabbed it. This time there was a message from an unknown number. The words blurred at first, as though my eyes refused to focus, then sharpened into a single sentence. Don't cover your ears. Elena, you're the best noise this place has had. The phone slipped from my hands. My pulse was a frantic drumbeat, hammering so loud against my ribs I was sure the thing on the other side of the wall could hear it too. I didn't sleep. I sat until dawn with every light on, coffee burning my stomach, eyes darting to every corner. And all day at the hospital, the hissing sound haunted me. In the ICU, the oxygen masks sighed over patients' mouths, and I swore one whisper bent around the syllables of my name. By the third night, exhaustion had sharpened into paranoia. Every hallway creak in the building sounded like footsteps. Every hum of the fridge echoed like an EKG beep. At 3:17, the cold came again, so sudden and total that the condensation on my glass of water froze into a thin rim of ice. The whisper returned, longer this time. Breathing in my name, breathing it out. The plaster bulged faintly where the sound pressed through, like the wall itself was inhaling. And I made the mistake of pressing my ear against it. Heat spread against my skin, damp and sour. And beneath it, breath, slow, steady, perfectly timed to my own, as though something on the other side had matched me, inhale for inhale. I jerked back, heart racing, and then my phone buzzed again. You're tired now. It's easier to take the silence, I screamed, not out of courage, but because my body couldn't hold the terror anymore. The sound echoed off the walls, swallowed almost instantly as though the building absorbed it. And from the vent, a faint hiss of laughter followed, threaded through the static like broken wires sparking. I began leaving the apartment after that, staying late at the hospital, dozing in call rooms. But even there, the sounds followed. A monitor alarm would glitch into static for a second. The hiss of a respirator would bend, twist, shape itself into something almost like a voice. By the time the weekend came, I was too hollow to resist. I went home, collapsed on the couch, and closed my eyes. For a moment, everything was still. Then the warmth bloomed against the wall. Knock, knock, knock. The sound of those knocks settled into me like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. I counted them under my breath, desperate to keep them contained. 3 beats. A pause. 3 more. The rhythm matched my own pulse, thudding against my skull until I couldn't tell if the knocking came from the wall or from inside my head. I didn't sleep again that night. By morning, my reflection in the bathroom mirror looked like a stranger, pale, eyes ringed purple, hair sticking to my temples. When I leaned close to splash water on my face, I swore the mirror fogged from a breath that wasn't mine. The sink stank faintly of rust, metallic and sharp like the trays we scrubbed at work. At the hospital, everything bled together. The alarms blurred into whispers. The hiss of the ventilators curved into syllables. My patients noticed. "You're jumpy tonight," one woman said, her voice weak under the oxygen mask. She smiled, but her eyes tracked the ceiling as though she heard it too. Ryan cornered me in the break room again. "You okay, Foster?" His tone was sharper this time, not teasing. "You look like hell." "Thanks," I muttered, stirring sugar into coffee I wouldn't drink. My hands shook so hard the spoon clinked against the mug. "You're hearing it again, aren't you? Whatever's in that place." I didn't answer. His silence stretched. Then he leaned in. "Move out. Don't stick around waiting for something to get worse. I've seen it before. People think they can handle weird shit, but it gets inside your head, and once it's in, it doesn't leave." His words sat heavy with me all shift. When I finally trudged back to my apartment, dawn spilling pale across the river, I considered turning around and going anywhere else. But my legs carried me upstairs, and the moment I unlocked the door, the smell hit me. Not mildew anymore. Not just blood. Something chemical, sharp enough to sting my eyes. Formaldehyde. The unmistakable reek of preservation fluid. The same scent that clung to medical labs, embalming rooms. My stomach twisted. I stripped off my coat and tossed it into the hamper, but the stench stayed with me, sinking into my skin. The radiator clicked on, blasting air that should have been warm, but the temperature still dropped. My breath fogged instantly. The knocks didn't wait for 317 this time. They started the moment I sat down. Knock, 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 patient, expectant. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs, trying to anchor myself, and whispered into the room, "What do you want?" The silence that followed was worse than any answer. Then the vent hissed, a burst of static, high-pitched, whining like a broken EKG machine. And through it, noise. I jumped to my feet, heart racing. "No," I whispered. "You're not real." The wall bulged, faint but visible. The plaster pushed outward, a slow inhale before sinking back as though something on the other side had pressed its face against it. I ran. Out the door, down the stairwell, the sound of my footsteps chased by the echo of another set, always a beat behind. When I burst into the street, the rain had returned, hammering the pavement. I gulped it in like oxygen. But even under the storm, I heard it, the hiss of a respirator bent into a whisper. My name. I didn't go back that night. I slept in a chair at the hospital, head tilted against the wall, every sound magnified. At one point, I woke certain that someone stood just outside the on-call room, breathing through the door. But when I opened it, the hallway was empty. By the end of the week, I was unraveling. Patients' monitors seemed to glitch whenever I passed. Alarms burst into static, numbers flickered. Once, in the ICU, the waveform on a screen stuttered and spelled out letters, ELENA. I blinked, and it was gone. Ryan grabbed my wrist when he saw me shaking. "You can't keep this up," he said. "You're burning out. Move out tonight." But I couldn't. Not because I wanted to stay, because I felt tethered. Like the building had wound invisible, cords around me, dragging me back every time I thought of leaving for good. So I returned. That night, 3:17 a.m. came like an execution. The cold slammed through me. The plaster exhaled. My phone lit up again, buzzing so hard it rattled across the nightstand. Hands trembling, I picked it up. "Don't run, Elena. The walls need you." I dropped the phone, scrambling backward, and my spine hit the wall. Heat pulsed through it instantly, soaking into my bones. I screamed and rolled away, skin crawling. The plaster behind me throbbed like flesh. The knocks resumed, not 3 this time, dozens, a relentless pounding from every side. Ceiling, floor, walls. The apartment convulsed with sound. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the noise lived inside me now, vibrating through my teeth, rattling my chest. "Stop!" I shouted. My voice broke. "Leave me alone!" The pounding ceased. The silence after was vast, suffocating. Then softly, through the vent, a laugh. Thin, papery, like lungs full of dust. I ran again. I don't remember leaving. Don't remember locking the door. One moment I was in my apartment. The next I was outside, barefoot on wet pavement, the rain soaking me through. I didn't go back. I left everything inside. Clothes, dishes, photos, all of it. I thought leaving would free me. But it didn't. Now in the hospital, I work until my legs shake, until my head nods forward on its own. I nap in supply closets, in empty rooms, anywhere that isn't home. But the haunting followed. Sometimes the monitors glitch into static for a second too long. Sometimes the hiss of oxygen bends into syllables. Last night in the ICU, I heard it again. My patients sleeping, machines humming steady. And through it in the thin metallic hiss of the respirators, a sound I knew too well. Not my name this time. Something worse. The slow, steady exhale of plaster walls breathing out. I never used to mind living alone. At 29, after a string of failed relationships and the quiet humiliation of moving back to Ashburn, Virginia, solitude felt almost like freedom. Independence disguised as exile. My name is Hannah Pierce, and last December I rented a basement apartment on Holloway Street. The kind of place you find when you've stopped being picky. Concrete walls sweating damp, pipes groaning overhead, faint mildew in the carpet that never quite dried. But it was cheap and it kept me close to the 24-hour diner where I worked the night shift. Loneliness was the price I paid for peace. But the price was rising. At the diner, the nights were filled with the sounds of clattering pans, grease popping, orders shouted over the hiss of the grill. Cheryl, my manager, rasped her voice raw with smoke and coffee, while Brian, the fry cook, tried filling silence with jokes that never landed. The air smelled of old grease and metallic tang, a scent that stuck to my uniform no matter how many washes. At first, I liked the constant noise, the clang and sizzle that left no room for silence. But even there, silence found me. The pacing started faint when I came home too wired to sleep. A sound above me dragging heavy like the exhausted shuffle of a chef closing up after too many hours on their feet, or the stiff methodical steps of a supervisor doing a late-night check, steady and unyielding. Except there was no one above me. My apartment was the basement. The upstairs had been empty for years. I woke every night at the exact same time, 2:47 a.m., as if something had plucked me awake. The footsteps would begin. Deliberate, measured, tracing a path above me as if they knew I was lying there frozen, listening, and worse, the smell came with them. Not the kitchen grease I couldn't escape at work, but something darker, sharper, like soil turned over after rain mixed with the sour edge of spoiled fryer oil. The stink crawled down my throat and stayed there. At the diner, Cheryl squinted at me one night while she stubbed her cigarette into a mug. "You sleepin' at all, Hannah?" she asked, voice more accusation than concern. I shook my head, pushing an empty coffee pot back under the machine. "Can't," she shrugged, but not unkindly. "It'll catch up. Everything does. Everything does." The words clung to me. One morning, after another sleepless night, I found the kitchen chair angled just slightly different than I remembered. The clock on my nightstand blinked a time I hadn't set. Small things, but enough to dig under my skin. I told myself I was imagining it. Except Brian noticed too. "You look like hell," he muttered as he cracked eggs onto the grill. "Like someone's been walking on you all night." He grinned weakly, trying to make a joke of it, but his eyes lingered, unsettled. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I cornered the landlord, Mr. Hendricks, outside. He was an older man with sunken eyes, keys jangling from his belt. "I keep hearing footsteps upstairs," I said. "Like someone's in that apartment." His shoulders stiffened. He turned his keys over in his palm, metal clinking like nervous teeth. "That unit's been empty since '09, he muttered. He paused, then glanced at me, quick, sharp, like he was checking how much I already knew. His voice dropped. "Just don't ever answer it. Whatever you hear up there, you keep quiet. That's why we keep it empty." I froze. The words hollowed me out. He didn't say I was imagining it. He didn't laugh. He didn't deny the sound. He warned me. That night, the footsteps came heavier. I lay in bed, covers tight against me, the furnace clicking weakly like it was struggling for breath. My pulse thundered in my ears. Desperate, I pounded my fist against the ceiling. The footsteps stopped. For a single heartbeat, silence wrapped me. Then came the answering knock. 3 sharp raps from inside my wall, timed perfectly with the triple beat of my frantic pulse. I couldn't breathe. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to slow it, but the rhythm had already been claimed. The knock sank through me like a heartbeat I couldn't control. I pressed my palms over my ears, but it was already inside me, pulsing with my veins. I don't remember how long I stayed that way. rigid, skin prickling, lungs fluttering shallow. At some point, the silence pressed back in, thick and waiting. I didn't sleep again. The diner was no escape. The clang of the bell over the door, the hiss of the grill, the stench of grease. Everything sounded like echoes of that pacing above me. A dragging step became the scrape of Brian's spatula against the pan. The metallic tang of fryer oil reminded me of the sharp earth smell that seeped through my walls. The haunting wasn't contained to Holloway Street anymore. It followed me here, worming into the noise and stink. Brian caught me staring at the ceiling vents one night, coffee pot trembling in my hand. "You hear something?" he asked, low, like maybe he already knew. I forced a laugh that cracked at the edges. "No, just tired." He looked at me for too long before nodding, like he wanted to believe me more than he actually did. When I came home, exhaustion hit me in waves, but sleep was impossible. 2:47 a.m., every night exact. My eyes would snap open as if summoned, and the pacing would begin. This time it wasn't above, it was closer, circling the walls, as if searching for the weakest spot. I pressed my face into the pillow, holding my breath, but the breathing followed. Shallow, wet, sinking with mine. I tried to hold back a sob, but the moment my chest quivered, the sound matched it, filling the room with a second set of lungs. I stopped eating. Coffee replaced food. My hands shook on shift until Cheryl finally snapped. "You're no good to me like this," she said, blowing smoke across the counter. "Go home and sleep. Whatever's crawling around in your head, let it die there." But it didn't die. It grew. The next night I found footprints, muddy, dark, trailing from my bed to the sink. The soil was damp, fresh, leaving smears on the linoleum. My heart shrank in my chest. I backed against the wall, whispering no, 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 but the word had no weight. And then I saw it. In the corner of the kitchen, barely visible against the dim light from the street, stood a figure. Its outline blurred, like my vision was failing. Its head tilted, listening. Not watching, listening, and it looked like me. Taller, thinner. A starved version of myself, the skin stretched too tight, the frame elongated as if hunger had reshaped it. Its eyes were hollow sockets that seemed to strain for sound rather than sight. My sound, my breath. My life, I couldn't scream. My chest collapsed under invisible weight. The air tasted like wet soil mixed with rancid grease clogging my throat. I wanted to move, to run, but the thing only leaned closer, the faint suggestion of a mouth curving. Not a smile, not a frown, just the acknowledgement of ownership. I blinked. It was gone. The footprints too. Only the smell remained, sharp and oily, threading into my lungs. After that, nothing in the apartment felt mine. The chair scraped back by inches when I returned from work. My toothbrush was damp, though I hadn't used it. My own reflection in the mirror flickered at the edges as if something else stood behind my eyes, waiting to step forward. I stopped asking questions. Hendrix's warning clanged in my skull. Don't ever answer it. But I already had. The knock that matched my pulse, the breath that aligned with mine, I had answered without knowing. Now at 2:47 a.m., I don't wait for the sound. I hear it before I wake, like my body stirs in obedience. My chest rises and falls against a rhythm that isn't mine anymore. If I try to take a breath on my own, the silence presses harder, filling the room with a suffocating demand until I give in and let it guide me. Last night I tried resisting. I forced a gasp, wild and ragged outside its timing. For a second, the air itself seemed to splinter. Then everything in the room tightened, walls straining, pipes groaning like bones. My body convulsed under the weight of its silence. I almost blacked out before I fell back into rhythm, choking, gasping, begging for the breath it allowed me. I don't know if I'll ever take another free breath again, because now I lie awake every night at 2:47, listening to it breathe through me. And worse, mine is matching its, and every time I try to inhale on my own, the silence pushes back. I never liked how the house sounded after midnight. The walls seemed to breathe differently, like lungs exhaling too close to my ear. That first night after the movers left, I thought the creaks and sighs were only nerves, the sounds of an old rental introducing itself to me. But the air carried weight, as if every quiet shift was being performed for my benefit. I told myself I was imagining it, the same way you tell yourself the coat on the chair isn't a person when you wake at 3 a.m. But deep down I knew, this silence wasn't emptiness. It was attention, My name is Marissa Kane, I'm 31, and this was supposed to be my refuge. A small 2-story house on Maplewood Drive with white siding, blunt little hedges, and shutters the color of faded sage. After the divorce, I'd sworn solitude would be healing, that I needed walls of my own, even if they were paper-thin and bland. By day, the house was forgettable. Sunlight made it ordinary. Wood floors, beige walls, windows that rattled a little in the wind. You could pass it on the street and not glance twice. But at night it changed. The stillness deepened and the silence pressed in, a suffocating blanket. It didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. I worked from home editing academic manuscripts. Dense, joyless things about cell metabolism, medieval politics, or comparative linguistics. Entire days would vanish into correcting footnotes, clicking keys, cross-checking citations. The rhythm of my typing filled the space around me, a mechanical reassurance that I was here, alive, functional. Sometimes I thought the house was listening. Every Sunday, Ava called. My older sister, perpetually concerned, perpetually probing. "Met anyone yet?" she'd ask, her tone breezy but her silence afterward sharp. "No," I'd say. "You can't hide forever." "I'm not hiding. I'm working." She didn't understand. After 10 years with Daniel, I wasn't craving companionship. I was craving absence. No footsteps in the hall when I wanted quiet. No arguments about dishes or late hours. No body heat filling the bed beside me. Just space. But space has a way of expanding until it feels hostile. The first time the floorboards groaned at 2:41 a.m., I thought nothing of it. Houses settle. Wood shifts. But when it happened again the next night, the same minute, the same 3 distinct groans, something in me tightened. By the third night, I was waiting for it. I sat at my desk, the glow of my laptop dim, the cursor blinking at the edge of a paragraph on Shakespearean meter. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. My breath fogged faintly in the chill of the room. Then right on time, one creak with my inhale, a pause with my held breath, a heavier groan with my exhale. The boards were learning me, mimicking me. I froze, pulse in my throat. The cursor blinked, and for the first time I wondered if solitude had teeth. 2 weeks later, the tapping began, faint, deliberate, against the bedroom window. The problem? My bedroom is on the 2nd floor. No tree branches, no balcony, no easy access, just glass and air. The first night I jolted upright in bed, listening. The tapping came in clusters, 3 quick knocks, then silence. When I finally pulled the curtains aside, there was nothing but black sky and my own reflection. Eyes wide, hair tangled. The second night, it happened again. Louder. I grabbed my phone, pressed record, and sat there shivering until the tapping came. Later, when I played it back, there was no tapping at all. Only a whisper. A rasp that stretched my name. Marissa. As though it had been waiting in the static. The voice was one I recognized. Not Daniel's, not Ava's, not anyone I could name. But it carried the familiarity of something intimate, like overhearing yourself on a cheap dictation recording. Distorted, hollow, but undeniably yours. That was when I unplugged everything. Router, TV, phone charger. I wanted to prove the interference wasn't technological, that it wasn't in my head. But at 2:41, the floor groaned, and the tapping followed. This time, when I yanked the curtains apart, the reflection staring back at me didn't obey. My mouth hung open, gasping, but the reflection's mouth curled upward into a smile. Slow, wide, predatory. I stumbled back, knocking the chair into the desk, heart ricocheting. The curtains fell shut. I pressed myself against the wall, too afraid to breathe. Then the hallway floorboards creaked again. Not groaning this time, but shifting weight step by step. Approaching the door, I whispered to myself, "No one's there, no one's there, you're tired, it's nothing." But the doorknob turned. Slowly, with dreadful patience, I lunged forward to lock it. My hand wrapped the metal, but the knob was slick, damp, as if someone had just let go. That night, I dragged a blanket into the bathroom and curled into the bathtub, kitchen knife balanced in my lap. The porcelain was freezing against my spine. The faucet dripped, counting seconds. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, and then came the tapping again, only this time from below. From the drain. Hollow, echoing as though something deep in the pipes was knocking upward, trying to join me. I didn't sleep. I counted every drop of water until dawn. The next day I tried to distract myself with work. An article on 18th century legal reforms. But the words swam. The margins blurred. When I blinked, I could swear the sentences rearranged themselves into new phrases. One line read, "Marissa, I see you." Another, "Don't look away when I'm speaking." I shook my head, refreshed the document, and the words were gone. But the imprint of them lingered in my vision, ghostly after images. That Sunday, Ava called. "You sound far away," she said. "I'm just tired. You don't sound like yourself. Your voice, it's weird, like there's an echo." I froze, my mouth dry. "I have to go," I said, hanging up before she could press further. That night, 2:41 came like always. The floorboards matched my breathing. The tapping marked the window pane. And the whisper returned, louder, clearer. This time it wasn't just my name. It was a sentence, "You can't leave me." I didn't leave the house the next morning. I told myself I'd go for a walk, grab groceries, maybe sit in the park where other people existed, where voices didn't echo in the silence. But every time I touched the doorknob, the damp memory of it made my stomach twist. I couldn't shake the thought that if I stepped outside, the thing pressing against me here would only press harder out there. So I worked, or tried to. The manuscript waiting for me was about the evolution of early typefaces, something mechanical, predictable, harmless. I wanted harmless, but as I scrolled, my eyes snagged on a paragraph that shouldn't have been there. "You left him and now you're mine." The letters were lowercase, sloppy, nothing like the rest of the academic text. I blinked, refreshed the page. Gone. Just a clean discussion of fonts and letter spacing. I told myself exhaustion was warping me, that staring at text all day was finally breaking my brain. But the thought festered. What if the house knew I was an editor? What if it was using my work, my words, against me? That night I typed until my wrists ached, trying to drown the silence with keystrokes. The click of letters filling the room was almost soothing, a pulse I could control, until the sound shifted. It was subtle at first, my keys echoing back slightly out of sync, like someone typing along with me from a half-second behind. I stopped. The phantom typing continued 3 more strokes, then fell quiet. The clock ticked. My chest constricted, and then from the corner of the darkened screen came the reflection of my own shoulders hunched at the desk. Only it wasn't me. It was still typing, even though my hands were frozen in my lap. I snapped the laptop shut so hard the sound echoed through the house. 41 arrived. Right on time. The floorboards inhaled when I inhaled, groaned when I exhaled. The boards were keeping time with me as if the house itself was inside my lungs. The tapping followed, louder, angrier. I pulled the curtains apart with shaking hands. My reflection stared back at me. Its face twitched. Then, without my moving, it smiled again. Wide, deliberate, cruel. My own teeth bared in satisfaction. I stumbled backward, slammed into the dresser. From the hallway, a new sound. Not groaning. Not creaking, steps. Slow, deliberate, crossing the boards. The knife was in my hand before I registered it. I pressed my back to the wall, every muscle screaming. The steps stopped right outside my bedroom door. The knob turned. I lunged forward, slammed it shut, and locked it. My palm stuck to the metal. It was wet again, slick, leaving my skin cold and damp. I sniffed my hand. The moisture smelled faintly of iron. Blood. I slept in the bathtub again, knife in my lap. But the tapping came through the drain, echoing upward until I swore I could feel the pipes vibrating beneath me. Days blurred. I barely ate, barely slept. I started keeping every light in the house on, convinced shadows gave it strength. But the light didn't matter. The silence thickened anyway. The manuscripts on my computer changed more often now. Sentences rearranged themselves when I blinked. Footnotes became commands. Open the door. Look at me when I speak. Don't ignore me. Sunday came. Ava called. "You sound terrible," she said. "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine. Your voice. Marissa, it sounds like someone else is on the line with you. Like you're layered. I have to go. Marissa, I hung up." The silence afterward felt triumphant. That night I couldn't face the bedroom. I worked at the kitchen table instead, the knife beside me, the curtains drawn. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock. 2. My head lolled, exhaustion dragging me down. At 2:41, the refrigerator hummed louder, then fell silent. Every appliance seemed to pause. The house held its breath with me. Then creak, creak, creak. The steps came again, descending the hallway toward me. I gripped the knife. The tapping began, not on the window this time, but on the kitchen wall. Sharp, impatient, a pattern I almost recognized. 3 taps, a pause, 3 taps, a pause. The rhythm of Daniel clearing his throat when he wanted me to apologize first. The memory sliced through me. I pressed my hand against the wall. The tapping stopped. Then on the other side, something pressed back. Solid, warm. I ripped my hand away, heart hammering. The lights flickered. For a moment, the kitchen window became a mirror. My reflection stared at me, lips moving. Not tapping now, but speaking, forming words. I couldn't hear them, but I could read them. Let me in. The bulbs buzzed, steadied. The mirror vanished. Just black glass again. I stumbled back, shaking, whispering no, no, no under my breath. But the whisper that answered wasn't mine. Yes. The next morning, the doorknob to my bedroom was streaked dark. I touched it with the tissue, rust red. My stomach rolled. I tried to leave then. Packed a bag, keys in hand. But when I opened the front door, the air outside pressed against me like a wall. I couldn't step through. My lungs seized. I slammed the door shut, gasping, realizing escape wasn't possible. The house had me. That night I sat cross-legged on the bedroom floor, knife in hand, laptop closed. I stared at the door, waiting. 41. The boards breathed with me. The tapping began, and then the whisper came, clear as if it leaned against my ear. You can't leave me, Marissa. You are me. My throat closed. The reflection in the window twisted its mouth into a grin. My grin. My face, but sharper, hungrier. It leaned forward, lips brushing the glass. And in that instant, I felt the hot dampness on my own lips as if I had kissed myself from the other side. The doorknob rattled. Turned. Slowly. I stood frozen. Knife poised. The handle slickened again, my hand dripping with the scent of iron. The boards moaned with my breath rising and falling. I closed my eyes. Held my breath, and the whisper came again from the walls, the floor, the drain, the glass, everywhere. And so I keep waiting, holding my breath until the boards shift, until the tapping comes, until I hear my name rasped back to me in a voice that sounds too much like the only voice left in the house. Mine. I always thought the quiet of night would calm me, but it's in the silence that things began to move. My name is Lena Caldwell. 27 years old, and for most of my life I believed loneliness was my worst enemy. Last winter proved me wrong. The real danger isn't being alone, it's realizing you're not. I worked nights at a greasy little diner on Maple Avenue in Akron, Ohio, the kind of place that stayed open until 3 a.m. for insomniacs, truckers, and men with wedding rings they twisted nervously while nursing bottomless cups of burnt coffee. The lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, tinting everything in a sickly yellow pallor. By the end of each shift, my uniform was stiff with fryer grease, my head pounded with the hum of neon, and my throat rasped from repeating the same greetings in a cracked voice. Coffee? Pie? You want that to go? By the time I trudged up the 3 flights to my apartment at 2 a.m., the world outside was silent and frozen. Even the street lamps looked tired, their halos smeared by dirty glass. I should have been grateful for the stillness, but that's when the noises began. At first it was faint, so faint I thought I was imagining it. A shuffle above my ceiling, a pause, then a dragging step, deliberate and heavy. My building was old, all warped wood and peeling paint, so I told myself it was pipes or wind or the creak of the roof contracting in the cold. Anything but what it sounded like. Pacing. It always began after I kicked off my shoes and lay down, staring at the ceiling through the thin glow of the street lamp that leaked through the blinds. My landlord swore the apartment above mine had been vacant for over a decade. Since '09, he told me with a strange edge in his voice, like the date itself was cursed. He was a wiry man named Mr. Hendricks, always smelling of tobacco and mildew. He never looked me in the eye when I paid rent. One night, as he scribbled out my receipt with his unsteady hand, I finally asked about the noise. His pen paused mid-stroke, the nib scratching the paper. He didn't look up. That unit's been empty a long time. His jaw shifted as if he were chewing on words he didn't want to say. Finally, he slid the slip of paper toward me, his fingers trembling slightly. "Don't let it know you're listening," he muttered. "That's what it wants, the acknowledgement. You keep quiet or it'll ask you to join the rhythm." The way he said rhythm made my skin prickle. like he'd practiced the warning for years, like he'd heard it himself. I laughed it off at first, but the noises sharpened. Whenever I padded barefoot to the kitchen for a glass of water, the dragging sound echoed above me, step for step. If I paused, it paused. When I moved again, it followed, a half beat behind, like a partner in a cruel dance. Then it followed me beyond the apartment. At the diner, after the stragglers left and it was just me and Marcy wiping down the counters, I sometimes heard it in the back hallway. A rhythmic scrape of heavy shoes against ceiling tiles, perfectly timed with the scrape of my mop across the greasy linoleum. The first time I froze mid-stroke. The mop water stank of bleach and old grease, but underneath was something else. Sharp, metallic, earthy. Like rusted iron soaked in damp soil. I forced myself to keep moving, but my hand trembled on the mop handle. "You okay?" Marcy asked, snapping her gum as she stacked plates. "Yeah," I lied, though sweat prickled my scalp. "Just tired." When I finally confessed weeks later, she laughed. "Girl, you're running on fumes. You just need a real night's sleep." But when I invited her over for coffee after a shift, she stopped laughing. Because that morning, as we sat in my cramped living room with chipped mugs in hand, we both heard it. The slow, deliberate thud of pacing above us, followed by the unmistakable drag of something too heavy to move easily. The apartment overhead was locked. The floor plan had no vents or crawl spaces, and yet the sound traveled like breath against the nape of my neck. Marcy's smile collapsed. She stared at the ceiling with wide eyes, her hand tightening around the mug until the porcelain clicked against her nails. "You weren't kidding," she whispered. She set the mug down and left within minutes, mumbling excuses. She never came over again. That's when the smell grew worse. At night, it seeped from the vents, coating the air until I woke gagging. Metallic, earthy, rancid. The stench reminded me of the diner's grease trap on bad nights. Thick, sulfurous sludge mixed with the tang of blood and rust. I scrubbed the vents with lemon cleaner until my hands cracked, but it always returned heavier, as though the walls themselves were sweating decay. One evening, my neighbor Mr. Ellison knocked. He was a retired machinist who lived 2 doors down, his lungs rattling from years of factory air. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with sleepless purple. "You hear it too?" he asked before I could speak. His gaze darted upward, as if the ceiling might split open at any moment. The steps. The dragging. I hear it stopping right above my bed now. It knows when I'm listening, his voice broke. He clutched the doorknob like a lifeline, and I realized he was trembling. "Yes," I whispered. Saying it aloud felt like a sin, a confirmation. His lips tightened. "Don't answer. Whatever you do, don't answer." Then he turned and shuffled back to his apartment, his slippers scuffing the stained hallway carpet. After that, I stopped sleeping. I tried music, television. White noise, but the pacing threaded through it all, patient and relentless. The more I tried to drown it out, the louder it became. I began catching shadows in the corners, darker patches that seemed to stretch against the dim light of the street lamp. My reflection looked foreign, as though some other face stared back beneath the surface of the mirror. Then came February. Snowbound nights, temperatures sinking so low my windows frosted from the inside. That's when everything escalated. It was exactly 2:17 a.m. when I woke to a groan above me, not the usual shuffle. A deeper sound, a strain, as if the ceiling itself were under immense pressure. The plaster began to sag. Slowly, agonizingly, it depressed into an oval shape, dust trickling down like dry sand. The groan turned into a bone-deep creak, like ribs bending under weight. My heart hammered as I scrambled off the bed, staring upward in horror. The sagging deepened, stretching lower, as if something vast and heavy pressed down from the other side. The air grew thick with the metallic stink, iron and soil filling my lungs. Then the stomps began, violent, frenzied, circling above me, rattling the fixtures, showering me in dust. The rhythm was erratic, maddening, a pounding loop that seemed to chant without words. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock as the ceiling cracked, plaster splintering. Behind me, the oval bulge swelled, threatening to burst. My hand slipped on the knob, slick with sweat. And then the voice seeped through the vents, deep, hollow, vibrating through the walls, through my bones. "Answer me." I don't remember wrenching the door open, just the freezing air of the hallway slamming into me, my bare feet numb on the carpet and the voice still echoing, curling through the walls like smoke. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away, standing in the snow in nothing but my thin pajamas, shivering so hard my teeth ached. The streets were dead silent, the kind of frozen quiet where even the hum of the highway disappeared. My breath fogged into clouds that hung heavy in the air as if reluctant to leave me. I stared back at my building. The 3rd-floor window to my unit glowed faintly, pale against the night, but the bulge in the ceiling still burned in my mind. My body buzzed with adrenaline. I wanted to scream, but the silence pressed on me like a hand over my mouth. I didn't go back. Instead, I crashed on Marcy's couch for 2 nights, though she made it clear I'd overstayed my welcome. She kept giving me side glances like my fear was contagious. When I begged her to believe me, she shook her head. "Lena, you're not sleeping, you're working doubles, and you're carrying this, whatever this is, into my apartment. I can't." She lit another cigarette, exhaled, and wouldn't look at me, so I left. I told myself I wouldn't go back, but I had nowhere else. My savings were thin, my car unreliable, and rent had eaten what little cushion I had. When I crept back up the stairwell to my unit the 3rd night, I stood outside my own door for nearly an hour, ear pressed to the wood. Silence. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. That shock and exhaustion had twisted everything. But the second I stepped inside, the smell hit me, stronger than ever. Metallic and rancid, the tang of iron mixed with the sulfur of the diner's grease trap. I slept with every light on. The pacing didn't start that night, but I could feel the weight above me pressing, waiting. Mr. Ellison knocked the next morning. His eyes were glassy, his cheeks hollow. He leaned close, whispering as if afraid of being overheard. "It stopped walking," he said. His lips quivered. "Now it just waits. You feel it too, don't you? Waiting for us to slip, to answer." I nodded, and for a moment we shared something awful, like survivors of the same accident. After he left, I thought about what Mr. Hendricks had told me. Don't let it know you're listening. But how could I not listen when the silence itself throbbed with it? At work, things grew worse. The diner's nights stretched longer, lonelier. Truckers barely looked at me, and the drunks muttered to themselves in corners. Marcy avoided me, keeping her distance like I carried a disease. And then the noises followed. It started with the rhythm, the scrape of my mop across tile, perfectly echoed by the drag of something heavy above the ceiling tiles. I froze mid-stroke, but the echo continued, one scrape more like it was mocking me. The smell followed too. At first faint, rust and soil drifting from the vents in the back hallway. Then sharper, sulphurous, layered over the stench of rancid grease. I gagged, clamping my sleeve over my nose, but no one else seemed to notice. Sometimes I caught movement in the corner of my eye, a ripple across the ceiling tiles, like something pacing directly above me. I'd look up, mop handle trembling in my grip, but the tiles would be still blank, pretending nothing had happened. I started staying later, scrubbing the same counter over and over just to delay walking home, but it didn't matter. The thing followed. One night, as I wiped down the last booth, the voice came again. Not loud, not booming, just a vibration through the air vent above me, soft enough that if I hadn't been listening so hard, I might have thought it was the hum of the refrigerator. "Answer me." My hands shook so hard the rag fell from my grip. I backed away, knocking into a chair, my throat dry. I didn't answer. I never did, but I wanted to. That's what terrified me most. Days blurred. I stopped eating, my stomach twisting at the smell that clung to everything I touched. I scrubbed my clothes, but the iron tang lingered. My hair carried it. My skin absorbed it. Customers at the diner wrinkled their noses as if I hadn't bathed. I started losing time. I'd look up from a table and realize half an hour had passed without memory of serving anyone. Marcy stopped talking to me altogether. The worst came one night when I returned home after a double shift. Snow crunched under my boots as I trudged up the stairs, my body heavy with fatigue. The hallway outside my unit was unusually dark. The overhead light burnt out. My key slid into the lock with a metallic click, but I didn't turn it because I could hear it. On the other side of the door. Not pacing this time. Not dragging, breathing, slow, heavy, deliberate. The kind of breathing you hear in a room where no one else should be. I stepped back, heart slamming against my ribs. My legs trembled. I didn't open the door. I ran. That was the last night I slept inside that apartment. I found a cheap sublet across town, a basement room that smelled of mildew but at least felt empty. The silence there was heavy but natural, untainted. I thought I'd escaped, but it followed. At the diner, every closing shift, I still hear it. The dragging steps circling above the ceiling tiles, the scrape syncing with my mop, the faint press of something vast and heavy just out of sight. I keep the milkshake machine running to drown it out, the rattle and hum filling the silence. But sometimes the noise just becomes the rhythm, the beat it uses to remind me it's still there. Mr. Ellison doesn't answer his door anymore. Someone said an ambulance came last week, but no one talks about it. Mr. Hendricks avoids me, his eyes darting when I pass, as if afraid I'll bring it up, as if naming it would make it stronger. But I don't need to name it. I know what it wants. Because late at night when I'm closing up, rag in hand, my whole body aching, I hear the voice again. Not just in the vents now, but in the rhythm of my own breath, in the spaces between my thoughts, deep, hollow, patient. Answer me. I press my palms to my ears, but it seeps through bone, through marrow, vibrating in my skull, and the worst part, the part that makes my stomach clench and my throat dry, is that some nights, I want to let it know I hear it. I want to match its rhythm, because when it's there, I'm not alone. I never went back to Maple Avenue, but I don't think it matters anymore. The smell clings to me. The sound follows me. The silence is never safe. At the diner, when I mop floors near closing, I hear the rhythmic dragging scrape above me, circling. Sometimes it matches me perfectly. Sometimes it waits a beat like it's correcting me, teaching me. I try to hum to drown it out. But even my voice falls into its cadence, my breath syncing with its rhythm. I am always listening. And in the silence between mop strokes, in the pauses where exhaustion overtakes me, the voice slips in again, closer now inside me. Answer me. I never feared silence until it began to answer me back. My name is Rachel Kincaid and I am 32 years old. I moved into the duplex on Willow Street because I needed to breathe. That's what I told myself at least, that after ending 3 years with Aaron, I needed a place that was mine alone, where I could fold into quiet, lick my wounds, and heal. But I should have remembered that quiet was never kind to me. Not with Aaron, and not here. The left side of the duplex looked harmless enough when I signed the lease. Weather-stained siding, chipped paint, windows with aluminum frames warped from too many winters. It smelled of damp cedar after rain. To most people, it was just another aging rental in Portland, Oregon. To me, it was freedom. The silence was supposed to be mine. But silence never stays neutral. It has a weight, a pulse, a way of pressing in until you realize it's not absence but presence. Silence waits, and sometimes silence answers. The first week, I tried to settle into a routine. Work at the accounting office, groceries, dinner alone, a book on the couch. I let the television sit dark, proud of myself for not needing the noise anymore. At night, I lay in bed and listened to the duplex's voice, pipe sighing, wood expanding, refrigerator humming too loud for comfort. I told myself these were normal, harmless. But then came the tapping. The first time was on a Thursday 1 week after moving in. 2:13 a.m. I woke as though nudged, the way Aaron used to wake me when he wanted something, not with words but with a sharp ahum in the dark, until I rolled over, guilty before I knew what I'd done. That same rhythm lived in the sound, a deliberate tap against my bedroom wall. 1. A pause. 1 again, patient, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I froze, breath trapped in my chest. The wall beside my bed bordered the empty half of the duplex. I'd peeked through its windows before moving in. Bare floors, no furniture, nothing but dust. Vacant. The next night it came again. 2:13 a.m. exactly, not a minute earlier or later. My body tensed in advance as though I'd been given a standing appointment. I didn't wait. I prepared. The hours before were just filler. Empty time before the mandatory meeting at my wall. The tapping was the same. Deliberate, patient, like someone clearing their throat until I apologized first. I told myself it was neighbors 2 houses down, sound bouncing strangely. I told myself anything that kept me from admitting the truth. But when I confessed it to Denise at work, she laughed over her salad. It's just lonely house syndrome, Rach. Get a cat. Or a dating app. Anything to break the silence, I smiled, because that's what she expected. But inside, her words hollowed me out. A cat. An app, noise and distraction, that was all anyone thought I needed. As if silence hadn't been used as a leash before. As if I hadn't left Aaron because he could gut me with nothing more than withholding his voice. Still, I needed proof. When Michael, my younger brother, came to visit the next weekend, I begged him to stay overnight. "Just humor me," I said. "It'll sound crazy otherwise." He sighed but agreed. We drank a couple of beers, watched a dumb horror flick from the 80s, and I tried to act casual while my stomach knotted tighter with every passing minute. When the clock turned 2:13 a.m., the sound came. A single tap, then another. Michael sat up on the couch, his head cocked like he was trying to place a tune he half remembered. "You heard it, right?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He pulled on his shoes with slow, quiet movements like a man trying not to wake someone. I followed him to the door, panicked. "Michael, say something." "You heard it. Tell me you heard it." His face was pale, unreadable. He opened the door and stepped into the night. His car started, headlights sweeping over the street. He didn't speed. He just pulled away steady, careful, as though he was afraid to disturb the thing that had just tapped for him. He never came back. After that night, the house changed. The tapping spread, no longer content with the bedroom wall. It followed me to the kitchen tiles, the bathroom sink, the crawl space under the floor. Sometimes it came from the mirror, a faint rap beneath the glass, and once, after a long shower, I wiped away the condensation and found a word etched there. Still, a command, a judgment, an answer to my desperate craving for quiet. I staggered back, towel slipping, my breath clouding the mirror again. The word blurred but never vanished fully, a ghost fingerprint in the steam. The next day at work, Denise asked why I looked like hell. I almost told her, but I couldn't risk her smirk again. I was already unraveling. The smell began soon after. Not just mildew, not just damp. It was sharp, metallic, high-pitched in my nose. Like pressing a penny against my tongue too long, the taste lingering even after you spit it out. It seeped from the vents late at night, coating the air, clinging to my sheets. I lay awake, body thrumming, waiting. And every night at 2:13 a.m. it came. The tapping wasn't random anymore. It knew me, it studied me. And part of me, the part trained by years of Aaron's calculated silences, believed it. Because when the tapping came, at least I wasn't being ignored. The nights bled together after Michael left. Days at the office became hazy filler, spreadsheets and coffee that barely touched the exhaustion hollowing me out. My coworkers started avoiding my eyes in the break room. Denise stopped asking me to lunch. I think I scared them, the way I jumped at the copier or flinched when someone tapped a pen. But the house never let me forget what time it was. 2:13 a.m. was mine, or rather, I belonged to it. I didn't wait anymore. I braced. My evenings became a countdown. I'd sit on the couch, every light blazing, ears straining against the silence, my body already anticipating the sound like a body anticipating a blow. Tap. Pause. Tap. The rhythm was never frantic. Always patient, always the same as Aaron's throat clearing in the dark, the way he'd wait for me to break first, to apologize for something I hadn't done. It wasn't noise, it was communication. It was expectation. One night, when I couldn't stand it anymore, I pressed my ear to the wall, plaster gritty against my cheek. The house exhaled cold. Then I heard it breathing. Slow, deliberate, in perfect time with mine, as though it wanted me to know we were tethered. I pulled back, shaking, but the sound followed me into bed. Even when it stopped, I couldn't. My lungs didn't feel like my own anymore. The landlord's number burned in my phone for days before I called. When he finally answered, his voice was flat. "It's an old house, Ms. Kincaid. They all make noises." "This isn't pipes," I snapped. "There's someone in there, something." A pause. Then, "The other unit's been empty for months. Nobody's living there. Maybe you should find somewhere with more people around." More people. More noise. His tone was off, though, as if he knew what lived in the walls but had decided it wasn't his problem. I stopped calling. The smell grew stronger. Not just metallic, but suffocating, like blood left to rot in a damp basement. It coated my tongue, clung to my clothes. I scrubbed the vents with bleach until my hands cracked, but the stink returned each night, sharper, more insistent. I tried sleeping at Denise's once, pretending I just needed a girls' night. But at 2:13 a.m., I woke anyway. heart hammering, listening to the silence in her apartment until it throbbed with the shape of my own terror. I realized then it wasn't the house's time anymore. It was mine. The appointment had moved inside me. Back home, the manifestations escalated. The tapping gave way to pounding, rattling the bed frame, vibrating through the floorboards. I started shouting back, screaming at the walls until my throat tore raw. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. The mirror began showing words again, not every night, but often enough. Quiet. Still. Once smeared faintly through condensation, I saw mine. I scrubbed until my reflection warped in streaks. Sleep came in broken fragments. Sometimes I woke with the blanket pulled tight across my chest, tucked in the way Aaron used to when he wanted to pin me with kindness that felt like possession. Other times I woke standing in the hallway, nails dug into the drywall, listening for the next tap. The final night came cold and wet, October rain misting the street outside. I'd left every lamp on, but the house seemed to drink the light. By midnight, shadows had thickened, pooling in corners, stretching across the ceiling until the glow barely reached me. I sat on the bed, knees pulled to my chest, and waited. My appointment loomed. 4:13 a.m. When the minute struck, the lights flickered once, then died. Darkness pressed in, heavy and absolute, and the pounding began. Not gentle anymore, not patient, furious. The walls shuddered, the floor quaked, plaster cracked overhead. The air stank of pennies and wet earth so sharp I gagged, and then in the dark a voice rasped, "Rachel." It wasn't behind the wall anymore. It was in the room with me. I bolted. Barefoot, heart slamming, I ran into the street screaming. My neighbors' windows lit one by one. Doors opened. Shapes emerged, confused and concerned. I pointed at my duplex, sobbing, choking. But when they looked, the house stood silent. Still, no pounding, no voice. Just an aging duplex, weather-stained and quiet, mocking me. I never went back. My clothes, my books, my grandmother's locket, they're still inside. The landlord says the unit remains empty, unrented. But some nights, staying at my sister's, I wake without needing a clock. My body knows. And in the silence of her house, I hear it. Faint, deliberate tap, pause tap. It follows me. Patient, waiting, and the worst part. Some small, shameful part of me wants to press my ear against the wall and listen, because when it was tapping, at least it was paying attention.